Hello, my name is Eric Follick. I'm a Platonist contemplative ascetic and renunciant. I would like to read for you a little piece that I wrote called An Extremely Brief Introduction to Platonism that I was inspired to write by someone wondering how to introduce Platonism to people unfamiliar with it. So I wrote a little short introduction that hopefully doesn't assume any previous knowledge of Platonism, but is probably directed better to someone, the intelligent, informed reader who's familiar with at least one or more other spiritual systems, but doesn't know anything about Platonism. So, anyway, let me go ahead and read this for you. Okay, so here we go. Uh, Platonism is a spiritual or religious or soteriological system that offers a path to release from the endless cycle of reincarnation and its concomitant misery. It belongs to a family of such systems comprising Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Orphism, Pythagoreanism, and Platonism that all accept the facts of reincarnation, the cycle of repeated birth and death, that this works by karma, that this state is wretched and painful and unsatisfactory and a fallen and mistaken condition, and that it is possible through great and correctly directed effort to be released permanently from this state. All these systems consider that the path to this release consists of renunciation, asceticism, detachment, celibacy, vegetarianism and non harming, abstinence from alcohol and intoxicants, study and meditation or spiritual exercises. Platonism differs from the others as they do from each other in its metaphysics, its description of reality and how it relates to the spiritual path, the nature of release or the condition of having attained the freedom of the goal of the path, the text that it takes for study, its exact method of implementing the required behavioral and ascetic practices, and its methods of meditation and spiritual exercises. It also differs from the other systems in never having been or become an organized institutional religion or church for the many, in never having had an institutionalized monastic order, in not having devotional or ritual or magical practices to accommodate the non philosophical many, in not having costumes or ceremonies or holidays and so forth, and in never allowing its ascetic practitioners to become priests or mediators for the populace. In other words, Platonism has never developed a popular religion in addition to or as its central message. It always has been and remains a narrow way limited to a philosophical, intellectual, and spiritual elite for those few who are able and willing to follow its highly morally, spiritually, ascetically, contemplatively, and mentally demanding path and practice. The texts that Platonism studies, that form the Platonist scriptures, so to speak, are the dialogues of Plato and the Enneads of Plotinus. It implements its most stringent moral and ascetic standards and practices purely, with discernment and without legalism, extensive legal codes, extensive lists of rules devolving down to the level of manners and customs, and trying to exhaustively catalog specific regulations for every particular circumstance that could be encountered in a given relative environment, and of course, without the extensive prescriptions for ritual and ceremonial practice that preoccupy many other systems. Its meditation and contemplation practices consist in coming to understand the workings of things at the level of soul, ascending to contemplation of the actual Platonic forms in the divine mind, and finally ascending to contemplation of and union with the one or the good, which is the final release and goal. The Platonist system or description of reality consists of three existential or experiential levels or degrees of reality that are called the three hypostases. In descending order from first to last, and from most real to least real, These are the one or the good, the divine mind and the Platonic forms, and soul. The one or the good is the absolute, the utterly transcendent, the unity, the source, the purest noumenon, God, if you will, the source and origin and fount of all things, from which all things come, but which itself comes from nothing else, and which remains always unchanged as all else emanates from it. The divine mind thought, nous, that's the Greek word, emanates from the one and is the second most real and perfect thing. It is one unitary divine mind with its objects, with which it is neither different nor identical. The objects or thoughts of the single divine mind are the Platonic ideas or forms or archetypes or things in themselves, which again are not different or outside the one mind. This level is a one many, not a pure unity like the one. Though dynamic and active, it is still unchanging, still transcends, is beyond time and space. The third level of existence is that of soul, both the world soul and the soul of the all, and all the individual souls of individual sentient beings, both human and non-human. This is the level of changing and permanent differentiated sensory experience, of space and time, of separate individuals, of cyclic individuated sensate spatio-temporal existence, of the cycle and of reincarnation and of karma. Though still divinely ordered by the world soul, it is a level of suffering, misery, and unsatisfactoriness, and endless rebirth in time and space and change for individual souls. This is the level at which we find ourselves now, and that we must transcend and escape from back to the higher hypostases from which we have fallen. To ordinary people and animals, this seems to be the only real and true level. Especially now in the naturalist modern world, where so many deny transcendence altogether or have never even heard or conceived of it, and think that the sensory world is all that there is, but actually is the least true and least real. It is the level of mere opinion, not of true knowledge, which is of the higher levels. The Platonist practitioner and ascetic works to transcend this lowest level of individual soul and escape from it and the cycle of reincarnation dictated by karma, and return to and re-become the higher hypostases. Since the soul is imprisoned in the body and sensory existence and takes these things as real, he or she renounces all sensory things and activities of this world as much as possible, and devotes him or herself solely to transcendent and divine things alone, to things of the soul, not things of the body and its desires and emotions. Thus he is celibate and teetotaling, not deliberately doling his divine soul with intoxicants, and abstains from worldly pleasures as much as possible, is a true ascetic and renunciant. He aims at conforming to the true paradigmatic virtues in the noetic realm, that is the second hypostasis, and so cultivates all moral virtue and non-harming. He is vegan, completely honest, doesn't obtain the necessities of life in a way that harms any beings, is kind and gentle, and etc., and etc. Through study of the dialogues of Plato and the Enneads of Plotinus and ancillary works and reflection, he gains an understanding of the nature of things here at the level of soul and how they work, an idea of what the higher hypostases must be like and of their utter transcendence, of how to live virtuously and ascetically, and of the nature of the path and what it entails and how to practice it. Then, with all this as a base, he devotes himself to contemplation practice to attain direct noetic apprehension of the Platonic forms and transfer his soul to the level of and unity with the second hypostasis, the divine mind thought. Finally, established here at the second level, he devotes himself even further and vigorously to contemplation practice to directly touch and apprehend the one, the good, and eventually attain complete and permanent reunion with and re-identification with it. This is the release from the cycle of birth and death and the final goal. All this is most difficult and is likely to take many lifetimes and rebirths, with many years of hard work to make some progress in any given birth. Incidentally, that's the case actually for any spiritual system, despite what many contemporary people seem to think these days. Um, Given the non institutional, individual, transcendent, and historical nature of the Platonist system and practice, and its lack of dependence on particular worldly structures, the Platonist ascetics, the philosophoi, that's the Greek word, are rather less likely to leave traces in the historical record. We are most fortunate that the dialogues and Enneads have been preserved, but if many other Platonist ascetics left any written records, many things were lost or destroyed when Christianity and Islam came to power, with their intolerance of anything else and their attempt to destroy all other writings. There has never been a time when the dialogues and Enneads were not being read, even in the original Greek, from antiquity through Byzantium into the Renaissance and modernity, and there couldn't have been actual Platonist contemplatives. But once Christianity and Islam took over, any such would have had to remain hidden at the cost of their lives. Nonetheless, Platonism has greatly influenced the Abrahamic systems, and the Jewish, Islamic, and especially Christian mystical systems owe a great deal to, and in some cases are even largely based on, Platonism. After Plotinus, but before the final suppression of all non-Abrahamic practices, some teachers and people, such as Iamblichus and Proclus, who considered themselves Platonists but departed thoroughly from the actual Platonic system, attempted to incorporate polytheistic, ritual, theurgic, and magical practices and thought into Platonism and make it more like the other popular religions. Unfortunately, most of the few modern people who have attempted to revive some sort of Platonist practice have fallen in with and follow these later ideas, or those of the conscious incorporation of into or blending with Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Okay, that's the little introduction there. I hope uh, you like it. I hope it's of benefit for uh, some people and who maybe aren't familiar with Platonism, and also to people who may um, want some ideas of how to uh, introduce it very briefly to others. So anyway, that's all, and thank you very much for listening and watching. And okay, that's great. Take care. Bye bye.